We're so excited that you are here. We hope that as we dig into this third word, Ahavah, this idea of love, that you can make the connection to Father's Day, because today is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to everybody who's celebrating today, and happy Father's Day to all of the people who have fathered us that we miss or that we don't get to see today as well. We're excited and happy for the way that God worked through them in our lives as well. So as we do have the last few weeks, we're going to start off with a great video from the Bible Project all about love. But before we do, reminder, what were our last two words? What were they all about? First word was Shema, which had to do with hearing. And the idea there was that hearing is not just letting things go into your brain, but making them actually flow through what you do. Hearing is all about listening and obeying. They go together. Last week, the word was Yahweh. What is Yahweh? Do we remember? It's the name of God. It's his first name. It's his personal name. The fact that God would give you his personal name is huge. It's really important. It sets the tone for your relationship with him. So today, this word Ahavah, love, is really important, and there's some great things that you're going to learn in this video. So let's go ahead, take a moment, relax. Let's watch this video together.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words as a way of expressing their devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. We're going to look at the third key word in this prayer, how Israel is called to love their God. But what does that mean? Love is a very common word in most languages, as it is in ancient Hebrew. It's pronounced Ahavah. It most basically refers to the kind of affection or care that one person shows another. It sometimes describes physical affection, like the king of Persia's love for Queen Esther. But there are other Hebrew words that more specifically refer to physical desire or sex. Ahavah is more broad. So Abraham had Ahavah for his son Isaac. That's parental love. Jonathan showed Ahavah for his friend David. That would be brotherly love. In fact, a whole group of people can have Ahavah for their leader, like when the Israelites showed love for their King David. Ahavah can even describe loyalty between political allies, like Hiram, the king of Tyre, loved David. They had good relations, and so Hiram wanted to help David's son Solomon build the temple. These are all different kinds of affection described with the one word, Ahavah. Now, all of this is helpful for understanding God's Ahavah in the Old Testament. So in Deuteronomy, Moses told the Israelites, God showed affection for you. He chose you because of his Ahavah for you. So God doesn't love because the Israelites earned it or deserve it. It simply originates from God's own character. He loves because he loves. This is why Jeremiah can say that God's love is everlasting. It has no end because it has no beginning. God's love just is an eternal fact of the universe. And God's love is not a duty, it's a genuine feeling, an affection that God experiences. This is why the prophet Hosea compares God's love for his people to a husband's Ahavah for his wife, or to a parent showing Ahavah for their child. It's one of the strongest things that God feels. But that doesn't mean that God's love is just a feeling. God's love is also in action. It's something God chooses to do. Like when Moses says, because of God's Ahavah for your ancestors, he brought you out of Egypt with great power. God's love isn't just a sentiment, it is something God does. And so, in the Shema, Israel is called to respond to God's Ahavah by showing Ahavah in return. And just like God's love, human love is to show itself through actions. Like in Deuteronomy 10. What does the Lord your God ask of you except to fear the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to love him and serve him, and to keep his commands? All of these actions are centered around love. If I'm not doing them, I don't actually love God, I just say I do. Which leads to one last thing. In the Old Testament, I show my love for God by how I treat the people around me. In Deuteronomy, we read that God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and he shows Ahavah for the immigrants among you, giving them food and clothing, and so you also show Ahavah for the immigrant. So the people are to imitate God's Ahavah by showing Ahavah for others. This is the idea underneath the famous line, you shall Ahavah your neighbor as yourself. And so at the end of the day, all of this is rooted in God's own eternal Ahavah. Like we read in the New Testament letter of 1 John, we love because God first loved us. And that's the Hebrew word Ahavah.
All right. So, love, Ahavah, has everything to do with our main verse for this series, which is altogether called the Shema, named after the very first word. But it's all about how we look at our relationship with God and our relationship with the world. It starts off, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That's where we start. And then the very first thing that we are called to do is to judge other people, correct? The very first thing we're called to do is to take care of ourselves. The very first thing we're called to do is to be wise with the things we've been blessed with. No, some of those are good, some of those are not quite as good, but they're not it at all. The first thing we're called to do is simply to love. It's called simply to love. That's the very first thing. That's the primary thing. If nothing else in this world happens, we should be focusing on love. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. All of those things will be coming up soon. We'll talk about them in more detail, but today it's about this love business. So it seems fitting that on Father's Day we talk about love. Well, maybe more so on Mother's Day, right? And in fact, on Mother's Day this year, we did talk about love. We used a different word from the Bible when we talked about that. So today, why do we use love for Father's Day? Instead, we should talk about like fishing or golfing or really tacky neckties, right? All those stereotypical things. But the reason why we have Father's Day, of course, is because of the centrality of love. Not just love between a husband and a wife, but love for kids, love for friends, love for people who weren't even your father, but who became a father for you. They took the time and the care and the energy to mentor you, to help you grow, to help you teach, to teach you things that you needed in this world. It's all about the centrality of love. And when we get back to that, we help ourselves understand who we are, what we're here for, and how we treat others. So here's the deal. It's more than a feeling, right? Love, just talked about as feeling, is just sentimentality. And nobody likes sentimentality. It's just kind of cheap. Love is an action. It has to be both. Just like Shema, right? To hear something isn't just about letting it rumble around in your brain. It's about how it makes its way through your life. God bundled those actions and those activities together in one word for hearing, and he does the same thing with love. As the video talked about, Ahavah is used all over the Old Testament and for a variety of types of relationships, which shows its universality. It shows that this is a word that really gets at the core of what love is. So we can use it to talk about our relationship with God. After all, the Shema says, love the Lord your God with all that you are. So that's easy, right? Loving the Lord your God. Well, what are we called? How does this work? What are we called to do? In Deuteronomy chapter 10, we get more context into this. You see, here's the basis for this love. Look now, the highest heavens and the earth and everything in it all belong to the Lord your God. They belong to Yahweh, the God who gave us his name, who said we can call upon him in any instance, that he knows us, that he loves us. Everything in the universe belongs to him. Now tell me, how much is that? Can we quantify how much that is? Not really. No, everything in the universe is still expanding. There's more and more of it all the time. Kind of, sort of, maybe. All of the author is saying is that everything that you see around you is God's. He's in charge of it. He has created it. He has made it. He's concerned with it. And yet, the Lord chose your ancestors to be the objects of his love. With all of the options available to him, the smorgasbord of created items which to love, he chose you. He chose the people that have come before you, and he has chosen the people who will come after you. He chooses you. He chooses us to show his love. He chose you, their descendants above all other nations, as is evident today. This is the key that helps us put this all into context. When we start by understanding love through the truth that God loves us. You see, this is not a given in this world. There's this thing where when people look at the Bible, they look at Jesus, they look at the story of God as told through Christian eyes, they look at it and they say, wait a second. Why Jesus? Why that one specific person? Why this one plan that why did God have a plan for Jesus? And why did he enact it at that time and at that place? And why did he choose these specific people like Peter, James, and John, and Mary, and all the other Marys? Why did he choose them to be witnesses of it? And how did he choose Mark and Matthew and John to write these things down and to tell the story in communities? This is all way too specific. For a God who could do anything in all of the universe with all the power in the world, why would he choose this way? Because frankly, it's kind of dumb. Isn't it? I mean, if you had your way, if you were going to save the world, wouldn't you start with the most powerful people in the world and change their hearts and minds? And wouldn't you then allow them to show others the way and help it filter down quickly and commandingly? I think that's typically the way we do things in our lives. But that wasn't the way that God chose. And this is I'm going to teach you a big theological idea right now. You ready? All of this particular stuff, it's called the scandal of particularity. Did you hear that? The scandal of particularity. That it is scandalous that God chose a certain person at a certain time, at a certain place to do all of these kinds of things. And that expands even to you today. What is it about you that makes you so good that God would actually care about you individually? It's a scandal. It's a scandal that he would. But the truth is that he does. He does. Every single one of us. He knows us. He cares about us. The Bible even says that he knows the number of hairs that are upon our heads, which for some of us does not take long to count. Don't look at the people around you. We already know who we are. It's a scandal that the God who has everything available to him focuses in on you. And yet that's exactly who he is and how he chooses to love. What does that instruct you in? If you are a follower of this God who does such scandalous things, how does it change the way that you look at your life? How you look at yourself and how you look at the world? It has to change it. It has to shift it around. And Jesus knew this because when he talked to his disciples right before he was making his last way into Jerusalem, where he knew that he was going to give himself up for the whole world, but not just the whole world, he was going to give himself up for you, that scandalous thing. This is what he told his followers. This is my commandment. Love one another in the same way that I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. I mean, think about that. In that moment, in that particular time, Jesus tells them, watch what I'm going to do. See the love in my actions for you, and then go and do likewise. Give up yourself for those around you. Now, he doesn't say there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's spouse or favorite child. You all have one, right? No, I'm just kidding. We don't have favorite children. He says for one's friends. He broadens that out. He says, look, the greatest way to show love is to sacrifice yourself for those whom God cares for. And who is it that Jesus taught us that God cares for? Who is our neighbor? It's not just the people like us. It's not just the people closest to us. It is every person. Every person, because they are people, because God has created them, because he has made them masterpieces. That is who we are called to love, and there is no greater way to show that love than to give up ourselves for them. This is the essence of fatherhood. This is the essence of how God our Father shows us love. And so we, particularly as fathers, follow his example and lay down who we are and what we care for and what we care about for our children and our grandchildren and those who will come after. And on our best days, we do it willingly. And on our not so best days, we do it grudgingly, but we still do it. That is how we show God's love to others. That's how we love in the same way that he has loved us. And you guys know, you're smart enough that you can generalize this outwardly from fathers, right? Particularly about fathers, but this is about our relationships just with people in general, about the people we work with, people we see every day, the neighbors and our communities. We serve them because we are particularly loved by God. Not because of what we've done or what we've donated or what we've given, but because we are his created masterpieces, and so are they. Ahavah. Ahavah. How do we show Ahavah? This is a great picture. This is from a few years ago, and I love this smile. Beata is one of my favorite people in the world. She is the social worker at our partner school right here in our neighborhood, West Elementary School in Lakewood. It's where all the kids in the neighborhoods around here go to school. And those bags are filled with, if I remember right, these are summer activity bags with gift certificates and activities that families in our community can use all summer long. And Beata is the one who gets to give these out. She knows the families that kind of need this extra support, and she gets to hand these bags and see their smiles and hear the thank yous and see the tears. And that must be awesome. But we don't get to. So we take over her job so that we get to see it? Probably not. We don't need to, right? We give of our resources and our time and our gifts to assemble all these things, to partner with her so that people can be helped purely because we sacrifice ourselves out of love for our neighbors. Do we need the credit? We don't need the credit. But the thanks go directly to God. The love that these people get to receive through Beata comes from God. They see that somebody cares and somebody loves them, and that somebody is this God who ahavas them. They are special. They are unique. In particular, they are loved. This is why we join together, not just to worship him, to give thanks, to grow in our own faith, but to ahava our community together. It's a huge piece of who God has made us to be, how he allows us to share our gifts and skills and resources. And we are simply thankful that we get the opportunity to love our neighbor as he has loved us. Because after all, what is love? Is it just a feeling, or is it more than a feeling? And I'm trying to figure out how many old songs I can quote in the next few weeks. I think every week there's been at least one, so see what you can find. These are Easter eggs hidden in here. It's more than a feeling. It has to be an action. So on Father's Day, great, enjoy that. We know how to do that. But tomorrow when it's not Father's Day, great, we know how to do that. Let's keep it up, everybody.